July 13th, 2024, was the kind of summer evening that felt like it could last forever. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the pristine, quiet streets of Westbrook, a small town where everyone knew each other's name. It was a place that felt safe, where nothing bad ever happened. But that evening it all changed. Lena Walker was missing. Her car, a silver sedan, was found abandoned on the outskirts of town, the engine still warm, but the doors wide open. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, just her purse lying on the passenger seat, her phone inside. And the most chilling detail, a note hastily written with a single sentence, "Don't look for me." Lena's husband, Tom Walker, stood in front of their home, the perfect picture of a distraught husband. He had called the police, he had spoken to every neighbor, he seemed to be doing everything right. But something in his eyes told a different story. Too calm, too rehearsed. The community was shocked. Lena had everything, a loving husband, a career she was passionate about, a beautiful house by the lake. She was the type of woman people admired, the kind of wife everyone wished they had. She had no enemies, no reason to run. And yet she was gone. The investigation seemed straightforward at first, but the more the detectives dug, the more they realized this wasn't a case of a simple disappearance. This was no random abduction. Lena's life had been a carefully constructed lie, and the man who appeared to be the loving husband, the one everyone thought they knew, had secrets too dark to ignore. What had really happened to Lena Walker? Was her disappearance as simple as a runaway wife, or was there something far more sinister hiding beneath the surface? It had been nearly 5 years since Lena and Tom Walker first met. Back then, Lena had been just another aspiring journalist, fresh out of college, filled with idealism and a hunger for success. She had met Tom at a networking event, a chance encounter that she often looked back on, wondering how her life would have turned out if she had never crossed paths with him. Tom had been everything Lena thought she needed: charming, confident, and a man with a plan. He was the CEO of his own company, a booming marketing firm that seemed to be on the edge of taking over the industry. His reputation was spotless, his future promising. He told her he admired her drive, and soon she found herself swept up in his world of business meetings and high society events. Their relationship moved quickly. Within a year, Tom had proposed to her during a weekend getaway to the mountains, surrounded by the breathtaking landscape of snow-covered peaks. The proposal was everything Lena had dreamed of, and their wedding was nothing short of spectacular. Friends, family, colleagues, all came together to celebrate the union of the perfect couple. It was the kind of wedding that would be featured in magazines, the kind that everyone envied. From the outside, Lena and Tom seemed like the ideal couple. They lived in a gorgeous home on the edge of Westbrook, a place where the streets were lined with manicured lawns and white picket fences. They were the picture of success and happiness, two people who had it all: love, wealth, respect. But as is often the case with things that seem too perfect, the cracks were starting to show. As the months went by, Tom became increasingly consumed by his business. Late nights, early mornings, he had a way of being present physically, but emotionally he had become distant. He still showered Lena with gifts, designer handbags, lavish vacations, but there was something missing, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Lena tried to ignore it, convincing herself that this was the life she had always wanted. She was living her dream, after all. And yet, there were moments of loneliness, moments where she would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like an outsider in her own home, the man lying beside her now more of a stranger than the man she had married. By early 2024, those moments had grown longer. Tom's behavior had shifted, but it wasn't just his workaholic tendencies that troubled Lena. He had become secretive, often taking calls in private, his expressions unreadable when she tried to engage him in conversation. Lena noticed that he was hardly ever at home, often staying at the office until late or at times gone for entire weekends without explanation. And when she did try to confront him, the answers were vague. Just business, just stress. Nothing out of the ordinary, he assured her. But Lena couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at her. There was something he wasn't telling her. It had been 3 days since Lena discovered the first crack in the facade. Tom's behavior had become more erratic over the past few months, but it was one small incident that would ultimately send Lena down the path to the truth. On April 9th, Lena had received an unexpected visit at work. It was Thomas Reynolds, a former colleague from her early days at the news agency, now a private investigator. He had come to her with a troubling question. "Have you noticed anything odd about Tom lately?" At first, Lena was taken aback. Thomas had always been a friendly acquaintance, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. But something in his voice made her pause. He handed her an envelope, his fingers trembling slightly. The envelope contained a series of photos. Tom, caught on camera, meeting with a woman late at night. They were at an upscale restaurant, their conversation seeming intimate, the woman's hand brushing Tom's arm in a way that felt unmistakably personal. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. She couldn't believe it. She had suspected something, but seeing the evidence laid out before her, the undeniable proof, was another matter entirely. The woman in the photos didn't look like someone Tom was casually acquainted with. She was too close, too familiar. Lena couldn't shake the sinking feeling in her stomach. Had Tom been hiding this affair all along? The truth was far more complicated than Lena could have ever imagined. Tom had been having an affair, and it wasn't just an affair. It was a manipulative, calculated game he had been playing for months. The woman in the photos was Isabel Hart, a successful real estate agent who had become entangled in Tom's web of lies. Isabel wasn't just another fling or passing attraction. She was part of Tom's plan to escape the life he had built with Lena. The next morning, Lena confronted Tom. The look on his face when he saw the photos said everything. The shock, the guilt, that he hadn't been careful enough, the way he tried to brush it off, claiming it was nothing, a mistake, something. That didn't matter. But Lena couldn't ignore the coldness in his words, the lack of remorse. "Lena, it was just a moment of weakness," he pleaded, his voice shaky. "You know how I've been under so much pressure with the company. Isabel just understands me." Lena's heart shattered as she stood there, staring at the man she had once trusted more than anyone else. The man who had promised her forever now stood before her, looking for any excuse, any way to justify what he had done. But there was no excuse. The emotional weight of that moment felt like a heavy fist in Lena's chest. She had always suspected something was off, but to hear it from him, to see it laid bare in front of her, it was unbearable. Her whole life, her whole marriage, was nothing but an illusion. The perfect husband she thought she had was no longer the man she knew, but the betrayal didn't stop there. As Tom tried to explain himself, something clicked in Lena's mind. The clues she had ignored, the odd phone calls, the business trips that never seemed to add up, they all suddenly made sense. Tom's business wasn't just crumbling from stress or bad investments. It had been a part of a much larger scheme. His affair with Isabel was just the surface. Lena pushed harder. "What is it you're not telling me, Tom? Why would you keep all this from me? What else are you hiding?" Tom's expression changed. For the first time, there was fear in his eyes. He stood silent for a long moment before answering, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just the affair, Lena. It's everything." Lena's mind raced as she tried to process his words. Everything. What was he talking about? Was there something more? Was it possible that the lies went deeper than she could imagine? But before she could ask further, Tom snapped back to his usual demeanor, claiming he needed space to think, that everything would be fine, that they would work it out. But Lena wasn't sure she could ever believe that again. That night, Lena found herself pacing the house. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. She knew there was more, there had to be. The perfect life she had built with Tom was unraveling before her eyes, and all she had was the nagging suspicion that he was still hiding something. Her mind kept going back to one thing, the way he had looked at her when she confronted him about the affair. There was guilt, yes, but also something else. Fear. Fear of being exposed, of losing everything. It was then that Lena made a decision. She would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. The morning after Lena's confrontation with Tom was a blur. The house was quiet, but the silence felt suffocating. Lena couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that gnawed at her insides, threatening to tear her apart. Tom had insisted they talk things through, that everything could be fixed if they just communicated, but in her heart, Lena knew it was over. The trust was shattered, and the love she thought she had for him had dissolved into something darker. Tom had left early that morning for a business meeting, as he always did, but Lena didn't believe a word of it. The affair was just the beginning. She could feel there was something more lurking in the shadows. She couldn't ignore the sense that Tom was hiding something far more dangerous than infidelity. Her gut twisted with unease, the deep, gnawing feeling that he had pushed her to the edge of something she could no longer control. Lena sat in their living room, staring out the window, trying to put the pieces together. Why was Tom acting this way? Why had he gotten so distant in the last few months? The nagging suspicion crept back into her mind. Had Tom been planning this for a while? Was there a deeper motive? And as the minutes ticked by, her mind raced toward a frightening realization. What if he wasn't just lying to her about the affair? What if there was something more? Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a message from her best friend Emma, who had been trying to reach her all morning. Emma's message was simple yet chilling. "Lena, I need to talk to you. I found something, please call me." The panic set in. What could Emma have found? Had she uncovered something about Tom? Was there evidence of something even darker? Lena grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed Emma's number. But it went straight to voicemail. "Emma, pick up." Lena's voice trembled with urgency. "What did you find? I need to know, please." Emma had been close to Lena for years. She knew her better than anyone, and the two had often confided in each other about their personal lives. But something about this message felt different. Emma's tone had been too serious, too frantic. Had Lena's suspicions been correct? Had Emma found something that would expose Tom once and for all? The minutes dragged on, and Lena could no longer sit in the house. She had to find out the truth. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could Tom be involved in something bigger? Had she been living in the same house with a stranger for months? By noon, Lena's frustration boiled over. She decided to do something she hadn't planned to. She was going to confront Tom again. This time she wouldn't hold back. She had to know the truth. She had to know what he was hiding. She grabbed her car keys, walked to the door, and froze. Just as she reached for the handle, the door to the garage opened. It was Tom. Lena's heart skipped a beat. He was back earlier than expected, and there was something different about him. His demeanor was colder, almost like he was expecting something. "Lena, you're home early," Tom said, his voice strained, almost too calm. His eyes, usually warm and inviting, now seemed guarded, cold. "Where have you been?" Lena's voice shook with a mix of fear and anger. "Where were you last night, Tom? I need the truth. What is going on with you?" Tom closed the distance between them slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Lena, I told you we're going to work through this. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Let's just talk." But Lena wasn't listening anymore. The words he spoke seemed like empty promises, and she was done listening. She was done being deceived. "Stop," she said, stepping back, her voice firm now. "I don't want to hear your lies anymore. I know everything." Tom's expression flickered for a second, but then it was gone. The cold mask returned. He stepped closer, too close, his presence overwhelming. His eyes no longer showed the fear he had earlier. They were calculating now, almost predatory. "You need to calm down, Lena," he said, his voice low. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Lena's breath caught in her throat. The chill in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. There was something else in his words, something dark. Before she could respond, Tom grabbed her arm, his grip strong and unyielding. "I told you to stop asking questions," he growled, his face inches from hers. Fear shot through Lena like electricity. For the first time she realized that this wasn't just about a broken marriage or an affair. This was something far more sinister. Tom wasn't just hiding his affair. He was hiding something deadly. With a sudden, brutal force, Tom shoved Lena into the wall, knocking the wind out of her. Her head hit the drywall with a sickening thud. Lena's world spun. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, only one thought. Pierced through the fog, Tom wasn't just the man she married. He was a man capable of unspeakable things. As she stumbled to her feet, fighting to regain her balance, Tom took a step back. For a moment it seemed like he might relent, might give her a chance to escape. But then his eyes narrowed, and the flicker of rage within him was unmistakable. It was too late to run. 3 days had passed since Lena Walker's disappearance. The search for her was growing more desperate by the hour. The police had followed every lead, interviewed every neighbor, and combed through the house where Lena had lived with her husband for nearly a decade. But each day brought more questions and fewer answers. Detective Brian Harris sat at his desk, reviewing the case file, his eyes scanning over Lena's missing person report. Her car, found abandoned with her purse still inside, had provided little evidence. There was no sign of forced entry into the house, no signs of a struggle. The most chilling detail was the note found in Lena's car. "Don't look for me." It was a message that had haunted the investigation from the start. Did Lena leave willingly, or had someone made her disappear? Everything pointed back to Tom Walker. As the investigation unfolded, it became increasingly clear that Tom wasn't just a husband waiting anxiously for his wife to return. His alibi for the night Lena disappeared was vague, his behavior suspicious. The calmness with which he reported her missing seemed too rehearsed. The more Detective Harris dug, the more he uncovered. The evening of April 14th, when Lena was last seen, Tom had left their home early in the evening for a supposed meeting. But when Harris examined the security footage from their neighbor's camera, he found a surprising detail. Tom had returned home late that night, but his movements were strange. He moved quickly, carrying what appeared to be a large suitcase, his face obscured by the shadows. The footage had been clear enough for Harris to notice that Tom had been unusually quick to hide something. But what? And where had he gone with the suitcase? What had he been hiding? The next step was simple. They needed to search Tom's business records. His firm, Walker & Co., had been one of the most respected marketing agencies in the city. But there were whispers. Whispers of financial irregularities, whispers of deals gone bad. Was Tom hiding something? Was his business failing, despite the success he projected to the world? As Harris looked through Tom's financial statements, the pattern became clear. Large sums of money had been funneled out of the company into personal accounts, the amounts growing larger in the weeks leading. For up to Lena's disappearance, these transfers had been camouflaged as legitimate business expenses. But the more Harris examined the records, the more the truth came into focus. Tom wasn't just hiding an affair. He was hiding massive financial fraud, embezzling from his clients and using his business to cover up the theft. A Ponzi scheme, using new investors' money to pay older investors, all while living a life of luxury with Lena by his side. And if anyone had discovered it, the whole operation could have collapsed. As Harris reviewed the evidence, one thing stood out. Tom had been in deep financial trouble. Lena must have found out, and that was the motive for her disappearance. She had to be silenced before she exposed him, but the real shock came when Harris found something even more disturbing. Tom had made plans to leave. A large wire transfer had been made to an overseas account just days before Lena went missing, and the flight records showed that Tom had booked a one-way ticket to South America. But there was more. Lena's best friend Emma had recently received a strange package in the mail. Inside there was a set of photographs, photos of Tom in a secret meeting with a man named Gregory Lane, someone with a reputation for money laundering and shady dealings. The connection was undeniable. Tom had been working with criminals and Lena had somehow found out. But the darkest discovery came when Emma called Harris with another chilling piece of evidence. A recording, a voice note left on her phone by Lena just hours before her disappearance. In the message, Lena's voice was trembling with fear, but it was clear. She knew what was happening. "I've seen everything, Emma. He's been hiding it all. His whole life is a lie. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't feel safe here. But I can't leave. I can't just disappear. There's something he's hiding, something bigger than me." Emma's voice cracked as she played the recording for Harris. She knew, Brian. She knew. Lena had uncovered the truth, and it had cost her everything. The question now was, where was Lena? Had she gone into hiding? Or had Tom done the unthinkable to silence her once and for all? Date, April 20th, 2024. The investigation into Lena Walker's disappearance had reached a turning point. Tom Walker, once the ideal husband, now stood at the center of a growing storm of fraud, betrayal, and the chilling possibility that he had been behind his wife's vanishing. The evidence against him was mounting, but something about the case didn't sit right with Detective Brian Harris. Despite all the signs pointing to Tom, his sudden behavior shifts, the financial fraud, the affair, and the alarming disappearance of Lena, there was still one nagging question that plagued Harris's mind. Where was Lena? The police had no physical evidence of foul play, no blood, no body, and no real proof that Tom had directly harmed her. Had she really run away? Had she left to escape his betrayal? Or had something far more sinister occurred? Then, out of nowhere, an unexpected ally appeared. Emma, Lena's best friend. Emma had been a constant presence throughout the investigation, always calling the detectives, asking for updates, providing whatever little information she had. She was desperate to find Lena and to bring justice for her best friend. But this time, when Emma called Detective Harris, her voice was filled with an unfamiliar urgency. "Detective, I think I've found something. Something you need to see." Harris immediately met with Emma, and she handed him a crumpled envelope she had found hidden in Lena's apartment, behind a stack of books. Inside there was a small notebook, filled with Lena's handwriting. The entries were scattered, but each one revealed a woman who had been slowly unraveling the mystery of Tom's lies. Lena had been keeping a secret journal, a diary of her own investigation into her husband's double life. The first few pages described Lena's growing suspicions, from the odd phone calls to the mysterious meetings Tom had been having. But as the journal entries progressed, something more terrifying emerged. Lena had uncovered the full extent of Tom's criminal activities, the Ponzi scheme, the stolen millions, and the dangerous people he had been dealing with. The entries were raw, filled with her frustration, her fear, and her growing sense of danger. On the final page, Lena had written, "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I'm scared. I think he knows I'm getting too close to the truth. I've seen the files. I know where the money is hidden. He can't keep running this scam forever. But if I go public with this, I'm afraid it won't just ruin him. It'll ruin us both. I'm afraid of what he'll do next." The last sentence sent a chill down Harris's spine. If anything happens to me, he did it. Lena's words were clear. She had known something was going to happen to her. She had been prepared, trying to leave a trail in case Tom tried to silence her. And the worst part? Lena had been keeping tabs on the people Tom had been involved with, people far more dangerous than him. As Harris skimmed through the notebook, one name kept appearing: Gregory Lane. Gregory Lane wasn't just a business associate. He was a known criminal. He had a history of money laundering, ties to dangerous underground networks, and a reputation for getting his hands dirty when it came to protecting his investments. He had been Tom's backer, the one pulling the strings behind the scenes, ensuring the Ponzi scheme ran smoothly. Lena had been close to uncovering Lane's full involvement. And in the final entries, Lena had detailed a meeting with someone who could be a key to exposing the entire operation. It was clear now that Tom's betrayal wasn't just about infidelity or greed. It had dangerous consequences, ones that Lena had been on the verge of exposing. But the notebook wasn't just a trail of facts. It was a death sentence. Lena had known that her life was at risk, and now the investigation took a darker turn. Emma was visibly shaken as she spoke. "She was so close to uncovering everything, Detective. I think she knew something was going to happen to her." Her voice trembled as she added, "I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know how deep he was in all this." Harris stood up, the weight of the discovery sinking in. The notebook had just given them the missing piece. Lena had been close to blowing everything wide open. She had uncovered the full extent of Tom's crimes and had been preparing to expose him. But before she could act, Tom had done the unthinkable. Date, April 22nd, 2024. The investigation into Lena Walker's disappearance had taken its darkest turn yet. With Tom Walker now the prime suspect, the truth was finally starting to surface. Lena's journal, the piece of evidence Emma had handed over, had given Detective Brian Harris the missing pieces he needed to understand the depth of the betrayal and deceit. But there was still one question that lingered, haunting him. Where was Lena's body? The discovery of Lena's final message, the ominous words in her journal, and her investigation into Tom's crimes, these were the final clues that had led them to one conclusion. Tom Walker had been running a criminal empire, and he had silenced his wife to protect it. But despite the mounting evidence against him, Tom's whereabouts remained unknown. The police were still searching for him, and his connections to dangerous criminals made him even harder to track. But just as Harris thought he had exhausted every lead, a new, unexpected clue emerged. It came in the form of a phone call, and this time, it wasn't from Emma or any of the detectives. It was from an anonymous source, someone who claimed to have information that could solve the case. The voice on the other end of the line was shaky, almost afraid to speak. "I know where she is," the voice whispered. Harris was immediately on edge. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. "Where is Lena?" the voice continued, the words coming in rushed, frantic breaths. "I'm not supposed to talk, but I can't live with myself anymore. I work with Tom. I know what he's done. He made me help him." The source, a former employee of Tom's firm, went on to explain that in the weeks leading up to Lena's disappearance, Tom had made some strange requests. He had ordered large amounts of construction materials and had hired a crew for a secret project. The project had been shrouded in mystery, and the employees who had worked on it had been sworn to silence. The former employee had witnessed Tom's strange behavior, but the final straw came when Tom had told him to never speak of this. The tip-off led Harris and his team to an abandoned construction site just outside of Westbrook. The site was quiet, isolated from the rest of the town. As they entered the area, they immediately noticed something strange. There was fresh soil, unusually disturbed, even though the site had been left inactive for years. They began digging. It took hours before they hit something solid, but when they did, the air grew heavy with dread. The earth seemed to refuse to give up its secret, but with each shovel full of dirt removed, the truth came into focus. A large metal crate was uncovered, buried beneath the soil. Harris's heart sank as he realized what it was. The crate had been welded shut, likely to prevent anyone from discovering its contents. The crate contained Lena. Her body was carefully hidden inside, the deep cuts and bruises on her skin suggesting she had fought for her life. But the most haunting detail was the expression frozen on her face, a mixture of fear and disbelief. The love she once shared with Tom had been overshadowed by his greed and deceit, and now it had cost her everything. But there was more. As they inspected the crate further, Harris noticed something even more chilling. Lena's wedding ring was missing. The absence of it struck him as odd. Tom had always been the type to cherish those symbols of his success and control. Yet, now that it was gone, it felt like an intentional act, a final mark of his dominance over her. Tom had made sure to erase every trace of Lena, but he had left behind the most important clue, her final act of defiance. The moment Lena had uncovered Tom's deepest secrets, his fraudulent schemes, his ties to dangerous criminals, had set everything in motion. She had become a threat, and in the end, Tom had done what was necessary to silence her forever. But the discovery of her body wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the final unraveling of Tom's empire. As Harris pieced the final evidence together, he realized something even more terrifying. Tom had planned his escape long before Lena's death. With the stolen millions, his flight plans to South America, and the money he had hidden away, it was clear he had set up a life for himself beyond the law, one that would protect him from ever being caught. But in the end, Lena had exposed him. She had left behind a trail of clues, her journal, the phone call, the photos, and now Tom's carefully constructed world was crumbling. The question remained, would they catch him before he vanished for good? May 1st, 2024. The discovery of Lena's body had shaken the small town of Westbrook to its core. Her disappearance, the mystery of her sudden vanishing, had captivated the community, with everyone wondering how someone as beloved as Lena could just disappear without a trace. But the truth was out now, and with it came the shocking revelation of just how far Tom Walker was willing to go to protect his empire of lies. Lena's final act of defiance, her discovery of Tom's fraud and the evidence she left behind, had been her undoing. But in the end, it had become his undoing as well. With the discovery of Lena's body, the police had finally managed to piece together the full extent of Tom's crimes. The Ponzi scheme, the millions he had stolen from his clients, the affair with Isabel Hart, it all came crashing down. But it wasn't just the financial crimes that would ruin him. It was the murder of his wife. Lena had been silenced, but her courage had exposed the truth. Tom had fled. After his last confrontation with Lena, after the brutal murder that had removed her as a threat, he had been preparing to leave. His plane ticket to South America had been found. His accounts had been drained, and a private jet was on standby. But it was too late for Tom. The evidence was piling up, and the police had already tracked his flight plans. He couldn't escape. Forever. The FBI had been brought in, and within days of Tom's disappearance, a tip had come in. Someone had seen Tom boarding a plane at a small private airstrip just outside of Burlington. The plane was heading to Buenos Aires, but Tom had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated the investigation. The FBI knew exactly where he was going. They found him. Tom Walker was arrested in a small hotel room in Buenos Aires, looking much like the man he used to be, charming, confident, but now broken. The man who once controlled a successful marketing firm, the man who had seemed to have it all, was reduced to nothing more than a fugitive running from the law. His arrest was quick, and as he was brought back to the United States, his world crumbled even further. The evidence was undeniable. His financial crimes were well documented. The motive for Lena's murder was clear. She knew too much. She had threatened to expose him, and in his mind, it was easier to kill her than to risk losing everything. But the true twist came during the trial. Tom's final confession, a shocking admission that no one expected, took everyone by surprise. On the stand, with his lawyers at his side, Tom seemed almost relieved. He spoke of his crimes in a detached manner, as if he had been waiting for the inevitable fall. "I didn't have a choice," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lena was going to ruin everything. She would have destroyed me. She knew too much, and I couldn't let her walk away." The chilling coldness in his words sent a wave of discomfort through the courtroom. He didn't show remorse. He didn't regret it. He simply saw Lena as a problem to be solved, a means to an end. But as the trial progressed, the full extent of Tom's manipulation became clearer. He had used his charm to deceive everyone around him, his colleagues, his friends, even the woman he had once promised to love. And in the end, it wasn't just Lena's life that was lost. It was the lives of the people he had betrayed. The final blow came when Lena's family gave their victim impact statement. Jennifer, Lena's sister, stood before the court and spoke. Of her sister's strength, her determination to fight for the truth, and the painful hole left by her absence. Jennifer's words were a final tribute to the woman who had fought to expose Tom, even at the cost of her own life. Lena may be gone, but she will never be forgotten. The trial concluded with a guilty verdict, and Tom Walker was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His empire of lies, deceit, and financial fraud had crumbled, and the man who once had it all was reduced to a mere shadow of the person he had once been. Lena's family, while devastated by her loss, found a sense of closure. They knew the truth had been exposed, and Tom would face the consequences of his actions. Though Lena's life was taken too soon, her bravery had ensured that justice was served. As for Tom, he would spend the rest of his life in a cell, knowing that Lena had taken him down from the grave. And in the quiet moments of reflection as the case came to an end, Lena's legacy lived on. Her courage, her pursuit of justice, and her willingness to expose the darkness lurking in her marriage had brought the truth to light. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more stories about betrayal, revenge, and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Stay tuned for more real-life crime tales that will leave you questioning the truth. And remember, the truth is always stranger than fiction. Make sure to check it out and let us know your thoughts in the comment section.